we are recording. I am here with Peter Rabbit. Peter, how are you doing?
I'm doing okay, thanks. How are you?
I'm doing pretty well. You and we started corresponding a while ago back in July.
hmm
And that was basically when no one had ever heard of me. Um, so you were kind enough to restack me and give me a bit of a boost at a time when I was writing in even more obscurity than I am now. So I wanted to ask you. You've got an article here that you've published on your profile. People can check out
Yeah,
on
a while ago.
acceleration and its discontents. So tell my audience a little bit about who you are and what your focus is.
Hi. So I published that a while ago. I've been slacking off a little bit, but you could say I'm sort of a aficionado for Land and his works. Uh, but my main focus is really not so much AI, which is talked about a lot nowadays, but more the biotechnology angle, specifically, reproductive technology and how AI can come into that.
So tell me a little bit about that because I'm also big on biotech. I think that a lot of the focus on AI is I think it's going to be shorter lived than people expect. I think probably in 10 years, um, yeah, I don't think AI is going to disappear or go away, but I think we'll probably talk about AI in the same way that we talk about like grocery stores where you check out your own food
Sure.
instead of having a
I
cashier.
mean,
So,
the more optimistic time frames uh, like predict AGI sometime between 2030s, mid 2030s and 2040. That's the original prediction by Ray Kurzweil. I think that's how his name is spelled. Um, yeah, but I think that until then, I think those predictions will prove a little bit too optimistic, and people will be a bit disappointed. You can see, way back in the 50s and 60s, there was a thing called ELISA. It was a computer program that already could somewhat imperfectly pass the Turing test. It actually fooled a few people. And what people did back then and continue to do now is move the goalposts. Like, if it can beat us in chess, it is intelligence. Then it didn't. People say, that doesn't matter. Then if you can, uh, do, how is it called, the Feinbaum? It's basically something related with pronouns. If AGI or AI can master, pronouns in certain circumstances. I think the name is Weinbaum. Schema. Yes, Weinbaum schema. Then it's intelligent. Then it did like back in the early 2010s, and something much more basic than ChatGPT. I don't recall the name. It wasn't even an LLM, and did that, and people just ignored it. Then we had AlphaGo with Google. I don't know if you heard about that. Related to protein folding, it's actually very important in the realm of biotechnology. And 2019, I think it's used a lot nowadays. AlphaGo in the biotechnology sphere, and something amazing. And people don't even think of that program as intelligent. And now you have ChatGPT, which can write poetry, do art. People like 10 years ago would say that if a program can do those things, it is intelligence. But now people just ignore it. So I think that 10 years from now, or even 20 years from now, we have some good capabilities, scaling laws, power laws, and so forth, lots of investment pouring into that sphere, but people just keep moving goalposts. And actually, I don't know if you're aware, I read it today. um, there was a program which purposely hacked its code. the full research. I know you've read that article. I don't remember the Substacker, but if that happened like 10 years ago, people would say, "Oh, AGI gonna kill us all. It's gonna rebel or whatever." But people just don't care anymore. So I think that will be a constant moving of the goalposts, and AGI will slowly become trivial. I don't even think it will have a big impact, that much of impact in industry and so on. But I've been talking too much now, so you can go on.
No, I don't think you're talking too much. I think that's relevant. I think that I'm probably more cynical than Ray Kurzweil. A lot more cynical. I think that what we're discovering, I think from my perspective, the AI is a product of internet input more than it is a product of
Yeah.
advances in computer science. So we have a lot more data inputs. We have, for example, if you took every single book that was ever written in human history and you used that as the input for AI, you said, read every single book and then I want you to spit out some human text as a result of that and try to pass the Turing test. Um, that is so small compared to what we produce every year in terms of text
Yeah.
messages and
Actually,
yeah, yeah. So
actually, yeah.
go
I
ahead.
think someone measured it. Every book and information and I don't know tablet written until 2000, it's like 5 exabytes. That's the estimation. And since 2000, we produced like 60 exabytes. Orders of magnitude greater. But go on, go on.
Yeah, exactly. No, I'm glad you have the numbers because I'm just making assertions here that people can fact check. But that to me is the basis of AI. It's that we have an incredible amount of data, we have an incredible amount of energy, and we're using energy and we're using data um, in order to basically pass a series of Turing tests. So when I Google any question. I don't know if you're familiar with XKCD, but as a web comic, it's always asking these questions. Randall Munroe is the author. He's always asking
Hmm.
these crazy questions like, how hard would I need to throw a teacup in order for it to reach escape velocity or something? So you can ask that to ChatGPT, and then it can scan everything that's ever been said and then pop out an answer. That would not have
Hmm.
been as easy to do 20 years ago, not because of any changes in our knowledge or understanding of, computer science, algorithms, whatever. It's just that we're dealing with a larger data set. And so in evolutionary terms, this is the difference between applying a selective pressure to a species for 100 years versus 1,000 years versus a million years. It's just a completely
Exactly.
different scale. And so I think viewing this as a dumb and blind selection process in the same way that evolution is a dumb and blind selective process, and then
I
believing
mean,
that we can get intelligence out of that, well, I mean, theoretically, if you believe in the theory of evolution, yes, humanity is intelligent and we're a product of evolution. But, that's not a surefire thing. Historically, we have a long evolutionary history where we don't seem to have created that level of intelligence. And figuring out exactly why that is, it's a complicated question, but I think it's relevant to the speed at which AI could produce a human-like intelligence. Which, yeah, I'm cynical about that, but I am optimistic about biotech because I think that we've already actually figured out how to create intelligence from matter, and that is with biology. So it seems like although that's a difficult technology, it's not easy to figure out, how
did you
biology
know?
works. It seems like it's a proven method. So that's where I'm more optimistic.
Did you know that the first uh, baby uh, that was born um, using genetic editing techniques? It was born already in like 2022, I think, uh, using embryo selection techniques. So that's something that is already happening. It's the genie is already gone out, and it will be slow at first. IVF was technique was first developed in the early 80s. Nowadays, only around 5% I think of birds are using IVF. In Israel, funnily enough, that's actually the rate is it's the highest of all the developed countries, so they are actually quite ahead in that. But I mean, it will take a while. IVF it's only 5% embryo selection, though it's already being used. It will take a little bit longer. I think the main reason why biotech advancement has been slower than, for example, AI and stuff like that is the regulatory environment. Um, People have a much bigger gut reaction to advancements in biotech than, say, software, because software is much more, esoteric. It's bits, zeros, and ones. People don't really, on a gut level, really get what that means. But biotech is flesh, is bone, so you can see it, you can feel it. So it's people are much more, how do I say it, concerned, so to speak. Which some concerns are valid, but most of them I think come from a place of I wouldn't like to say ignorance, but lack of knowledge of the field in general.
Yeah, we're going to be polite. We're not going to call them ignorant. We'll say they have a lack of knowledge.
No,
So
really,
we'll be
some of these
politically
things
correct.
are somewhat hard to get your head wrapped around. But yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's difficult to, there's an incentive problem. And this is the case with the internet. If you go back to the year 2000 and you look at guys like Mark Cuban, Elon Musk, Peter Thiel, Mark Zuckerberg, well, a little bit before his time, but Bill Gates, I mean, there were a lot of people who are very rich now, who a large percentage of their net wealth, I mean, they became billionaires through the dot-com bubble, through the internet.
The PayPal mafia.
Yeah, the PayPal mafia, but also, again, people who weren't even associated with PayPal or who were minor players. Like, Mark Cuban, I think, is an example of a guy that most people don't think of him as a internet billionaire, but that's what he is. That's where he made his money. And a lot of the people, and prior to that, most rich people in America, like in the 1980s, they made their money through the stock market. They made their money through financial mechanisms. So George Soros is kind of more resembling that older form of billionaire. Michael Milken, like Wolf of Wall Street, Ivan Boesky. These were Carl Icahn. These are some of the richest people in America, and they did it through the stock market, through financial instruments. But around the year 2000, there was a huge shift where it's not as if people in the stock market became poor, but the internet became such a phenomenon. It became so attractive to investors that all of the people who had worked in tech and in internet businesses, whatever, Jeff Bezos, Amazon, like all of these people started taking off, and there was a series of bubbles. It's not, we haven't just had one tech bubble. We've had several tech internet bubbles. For instance, during COVID, there was a second tech bubble where everyone thought, okay, all of these internet companies are going to go to the moon because we don't do the real world anymore. Now we just do the internet. So all of these, like Facebook, Snapchat, all of these apps, communication apps, social media, all of them skyrocketed. And then, Snapchat's still down like 75%. Some of them have recovered, right? But the point here is that I think
is Snapchat part of Facebook, or
no?
it's
Snapchat is an independent social media company.
Okay.
And I only know that because I lost money with it. So I was fooled. I was a victim of the bubble, just like many other people. So I'm not, smarter. I didn't predict it. But this is a historical cycle that we go through. And that doesn't mean that the internet is fake or that the internet doesn't have positive economic benefits or doesn't change. I'm not saying the internet's going to go away just because there was a tech bubble or a social media bubble. But I think it is accurate to simultaneously, we can admit that AI will have real effects. It will change the economy. It will change society. But at the same time, we're also in an AI bubble. We're also in a situation where people like Elon Musk, in the same way that they promoted NFTs or cryptocurrency, Dogecoin, there's also a bubble going on with AI. And I think at some point, there's going
It
to
will
be
burst.
correction and people are going to realize, okay, well,
Yeah.
maybe we were overly optimistic. So it doesn't mean that it's fake, but it also means that we have to temper our expectations when people say, it's the Terminator and AGI, Singularity, Ray Kurzweil. I think when Ray was originally saying that, maybe he was coming from a more honest place in his heart. But I think a lot of those talking points have been picked up by people who are actively trying to fuel a bubble, and that's why I'm skeptical. Whereas I think biotech, there's actually much less of a risk of a bubble. I'm not saying zero risk, but there's less of a risk because, as you say, people on a moral level, when you take issues like abortion, for example, on a moral level,
Hmm.
people are skeptical of, afraid of, and actually think it's bad, it's wrong, or it's
Yeah.
anti-religious to experiment with biotechnology, whereas AI somehow is like a neutral thing because it's silicon based rather than biological. And so that's why I'm ultimately cynical about AI and I'm bullish on biotech because I think as a society, we are overly optimistic about what robots can do, and we tend to downplay biotech because of a moral bias that we have, which might not be as strong in places like China. And I think when you talk about the gene editing, that actually did come out of China.
Yeah,
Correct me if I'm wrong.
2019.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, but you know what happened to the guy who did that? He was arrested. So I think in China as well, there's actually even more, in some aspects, even more conservatism towards, uh, biotech because, the ultimate goal of China, or more correctly, the CCP is what is perpetuate its power. So making missiles and so on doesn't really threaten them, but I don't know, say super intelligent babies might take on them and overthrow their rules. So there's not a lot of interest there as well. I don't know. I'm just speculating, but that's what I would think. At least she would think. But um, at the fundamental level, I think the AI is a bubble, as you said, but biotech is not because also there's less growth. So when there's less growth, there's less possibility for a bubble to form. There's less enthusiasm, unfortunately. But I would say uh, running in parallel with the theme of, as you said, abortion and reproductive rights, I think it's quite easy to frame, embryo selection and so on within that framework. So I would say that in the next few years, I mean, we even saw that. I don't think you saw that tweet from Taylor Swift. You know, she meant when she endorsed Kamala Harris, a week or so ago, I think, she mentioned abortion and so on. And last was IVF. That's what she mentioned in her tweet. So I would say that in the future, in short-term future, I think both IVF and other reproductive technologies will really um, blow off. I would blow up. I would say, and with that, a lot of money will come to play, and will be, a sort of a dynamic similar to what we see with AI today, with Nvidia, for example. Nvidia was growing like crazy, like until a few months ago, because of all the money, pouring in into the space. I would think that there will be additional challenges, mostly due to the structure of the biotech business. You know, you don't have one big multinational company. You have very small clinics spread around. I don't know, the US and Europe and so on. Even genetic screening. 23andMe is just going bankrupt. You have heard of that company?
Yeah, I've heard about what's going on where it seems like they're going to be privatized, they're going to be bought out and no longer be a private
Yeah.
company or a public company. and as a result, the board of directors have all resigned. Even I think I forget the Donna Zuckerberg, I think, was the last board member, and she ended up
Hmm.
resigning as well. So kind of scandalous. The way that's happening as a anytime a public corporation is bought out, it's in a hostile takeover, that's always scandalous. But especially now, people are worried about their privacy. They're worried about how their genetic data is going to be used. There's speculations that maybe this is being prompted by a scandal, that the company has done something wrong and that's why they're choosing to go private, because they want to hide something.
Yeah,
Are they selling people's
probably with their
genes to
user data.
China?
Yeah, probably something to do with user data. I mean, it would be a shame, but 23andMe is sitting in a gold mine. And that's precisely where AI comes up because, lots of these therapies, it's really complicated. Genes, they are not simple. There's pleiotropy, when one gene influences other genes and so on. There's epigenetics and so on. So all of this, it requires massive amounts of data to run uh, kinds of tests called GWAS, uh, genomic wide association studies. They require tons of data, tons of statistical calculations and so on. So I think AI will play a big role in helping us coming with novel ways to edit the genome, not just to safely delete certain illnesses without affecting the rest of the genome, but also, things like increases in intelligence, increases in fitness, and so on. And I think all of these will be a bit undercutted by the fundamental, uh, financial aspects of the industry. Biotech startups. I think Y Combinator has some articles on that. Something like I can't recall correctly, but 70, 80%. The failure rate, it's much higher in, say, biotech startups than compared to software startups. It's a very different business model. And you can see it in the reasons why, as you mentioned, people like Mark Cuban and so on got so rich during the dot-com bubble because, fundamentally software, it's very low low barrier to entrance. It's not the same in biotech, not just for physical reasons, like, you need a big lab and so on, but also compliance reasons with regulations and so on. So very high costs, very high barrier, uh, variable costs, and so on. I think this will undercut a bit the evolution of biotech, but as interest rises, as the ick factor goes away, I'm hopeful that regulations will be eased, especially in Europe where they are more strict. But in the future, I'm fundamentally hopeful. I wouldn't say I'm as skeptical as you towards AI. I think AI will also play a big role, but obviously, there's a bubble going on. I don't know how long will last. That's the $1 million question.
Probably a $1 trillion question, globally, in terms of the fact that it's not just Americans doing AI. The Chinese are doing AI. The Japanese are doing AI. So, yeah, I mean, there could be. I've predicted that I think when an AI bubble pops, I think that it could result in a global recession. We've had a global recession in 2008, so it's not something that we can survive. I don't think civilization is going to collapse, but I do think that um, the likelihood of a global recession as a result of an AI bubble, I think it's possible. And I think at the same time that we're going to have an economic downturn or a reduction in stock prices, I think we're also going to see people being unemployed. But I think from the average person's perspective, like if you work as a cashier, you work as a truck driver, you have a job that could potentially be replaced by
Mhm.
AI. I think for those people, the backlash is going to be pretty extremely anti technological. And unfortunately, that social mood is probably going to lead to more regulation, which is not ultimately helpful. And it's going to not just lead to regulation in AI, but it's going to lead to more regulation in biotech because there's going to be, frankly, what happens with biotech is not only does it bring us benefits, but also it destroys old industries. So there's a lot of money in the medical industry that's threatened by, I mean, there's a lot of money to be made, but there's also certain pills or
Hmm.
procedures or companies that benefit off the state of medicine as it currently is. And if we can create a world with
I mean,
biotech where, for example, look at Ozempic. Like Ozempic potentially could eliminate obesity.
yes.
And so there's a huge amount of money that's earned every year by companies like Jenny Craig or what, these dieting companies, exercise companies. All of these make money off of people being fat. There are a lot of doctors who do triple bypass surgeries, and they do stomach tightening surgeries, all of these things, or plastic surgeons, liposuction. If Ozempic is effective at eliminating all those industries, then those industries have an incentive to regulate biotech. And that's just one example. I mean, there's millions of more examples than that. So if biotech could, reduce the risk of heart disease, if biotech could, stop cancer before it happens, all of these sorts of things. And I think cancer is a genetic problem, and I think that's where biotech probably has one of the potentials to reduce mortality more than anywhere else is to look at
Is in
understanding
cancer,
what
yes.
causes cancer. So yeah, I think there's a huge regulatory trap that we're walking into, and it's kind of unavoidable, and there's not much we can do about it other than talk about it. But it's inevitable, I think, that companies will cynically promote misinformation and propaganda, and they'll use AI and say, like, you lost your job because of AI, and now biotech, it's like the same problem, and so now we need to regulate biotech. Which I hope will not ultimately be successful because I think it can be beneficial, but I think that's what's on the horizon.
Yeah, but as you mentioned, I mean, there are very many strong factors in favor of, I wouldn't say a biotech revolution, but a very steep rise. As you mentioned, for example, cancer. I mean, we already saw, during COVID pandemic, mRNA vaccines. Uh, some of the study cases are not only just against viruses, but precisely cancers and so on. Changing, for example, the information in the immune system, immunotherapy, to attack specific cancers that couldn't be reached with chemo or even surgery. For example, certain forms of brain cancer that deposit themselves in the brain blood barrier. I don't know if you heard about that. Um, that couldn't be reached with either, conventional therapies now can be treated or could be treated in the future with certain forms of mRNA um, treatments. And there's also Ozempic, as you talked about. It's kind of a wonder drug, so to speak. And there's more examples, and I think when the positives outweighs so much, even smear campaigns and so on, I don't think we're gonna see a rise in neo-ludism or whatever you want to call it. I mean, there will be some how would you say, difficulties in the labor market arising from automation and so on, but the speed, I think, will be slow. And we see this all the time. Technology always generates new niches where humans can focus on. We saw this with fax machines, computers, and with electrical machines and so on. It always creates, at the same time that destroys old jobs, it also creates new niches. Now, sometimes these new niches might be difficult. And you need education and so on, so that adjustment, that time gap between machines and AI replacing traditional workers in certain areas, and those workers, learning new skills, etc., to fill the new niches. That time might be, as you call a recession. As jobs are lost, and before new jobs are created, as society itself adapts to AI. Because one of the things, I don't know what's called. Um, it was a so-called paradox that was detected in the late 80s, I think. That was with the introduction with computers. Productivity didn't rose in firms. This was actually very notable, for example, in Japanese firms that were at the cutting edge at the time. And the reason was, managers and office workers, regular people, took many years, even decades, to fully adapt and redesign, management strategies and so on, to fully incorporate a new technology. And after that, you saw a rise in productivity, uh, new forms of employment, etc. I think the AI will be, perhaps it will take even a little bit longer. Managers and CEOs and regular people like you and me will have to be creative to fully adapt with the new changes. But, both with AI and biotechnology, I fundamentally think the positives will outweigh and speak louder than the negatives.
Yeah. I hope so as well. I think neo-Luddite rhetoric will increase. Whether it will be effective or not is a different question. I guess my tendency is to view that kind of rhetoric again as cynical, and I think that there is a history of cynical actors, corporations using regulation, for example, environmental regulation. Like right now, we have an electric car industry, and the electric car industry receives a lot of subsidies from the government to produce these electrical cars on the basis that if you use an electrical car, it's better for the environment. The truth is that lithium-ion batteries are pretty bad for the environment, and that gasoline is not as bad as lithium-ion. That fact is, but nobody knows that because nobody really bothers to research it. They just kind of like swallow. Traditional oil and gas haven't done a great job, actually, and despite the fact that they're they have a propaganda strategy, and that's basically to like buy Republicans and to not even try to contest the environmental thing. But I actually think there's an environmental argument to be made for oil and gas, and that the lithium is bad. So I think things like that give us evidence that it is possible that the government can be induced to create market regulations around new technologies, either in favor of them or against them, just based on economic calculation. Like there's a lot of, Elon Musk with Tesla made a lot of money through these environmental regulations because there were subsidies for green cars,
during the
electric
Obama.
cars. There's other arguments to be made there that if peak oil is real, then eventually we're going to have to do this anyway, so we might as well start now. I'm skeptical of the idea that peak oil is real. But yeah, there's a lot of, I think any way that you look at it, there is a history of companies promoting regulation, either in favor of new technology through subsidies or against it. And it's unclear what that will look like. I would like to see, biotech subsidized. I would like to see more funding into that. I'm not exactly how how to sell that to the public in the same way that green tech has done.
I think we need, industrial policy for biotech. As we are, at least you in the US already have, industrial policy. The CHIPS Act by Biden, a few years ago. I think there's also a need for biotech industrial policy, but will be a little bit of a hard sell to the general public and even to legislators and so on. But there's where China comes in. Even if I personally don't think she or the CCP is particularly interested in biotech, they are more interested in pursuing cheap manufacturing, advanced manufacturing, nuclear reactors. They are building a lot of them, even if they are not focused specifically on biotech. I think the threat of China will be enough to spur innovation. Like Sputnik, did in the US. Sputnik led to the creation of NASA. And a few years Sputnik was in 1954, I think. Just 15 years later, the US put a man on the moon. That's the power of competition and the fear of the other, in this case China. And I think that can be harnessed to overcome some of the challenges and introduce not only industrial policy at level of chips and AI, but also biotechnology and even electric vehicles. To be honest, I don't know much about peak oil. I haven't researched it, but one day it will eventually we will dry up. We'll suck up all the oil that's there, and we'll need to go around with something else. Nuclear power, I'm not sure. I think it will be a bit niche, like 5%, 10%, 15% of our energy mix, both in the US and maybe even in Europe. There are some exceptions like France, but that's a very specific case of industrial policy. But otherwise, I think that solar will be very big in the future. Solar prices have been dropping like crazy. Wind, not so much. No, there's hydropower. It's ancient. There will be a bit of natural gas. I think it's a really, efficient energy source, and it's mostly the reason why, for example, the US has been dropping in emissions is the switch over from coal to natural gas. But renewables, I think, are like 10% of your energy mix in the States, but will grow. I think for that growth to really fully come about, it will still need subsidies and so on. In the EU, we have a lot of that, and I'm fully in favor of industrial policy, specifically for electric vehicles and green tech. As you said, and you said correctly, lithium batteries, it's a bit iffy. It's actually quite an old technology from like a guy an English dude invented it like back in the 70s or whatever. It's really old. And the reason it's so old is because most people have overlooked batteries. No, the Chinese didn't. Actually, that's one area where they have actually overcome the West. They've invested like crazy in batteries. Even before in the late 2000s, early 2010s, you have BYD, but there are thousands of other companies. Some of them only sell in China batteries and so on. BYD, I don't know if you heard about them, the car maker.
Yeah, from China. I think I
Yeah,
might have even bought that stock at one point.
they started as a battery maker, selling batteries to Tesla, for example. And they've invested like crazy in batteries, and now I think they even come about with a sodium battery that's much cheaper and not toxic, not as toxic as lithium. But I will have to research that more. So I think that a lot of industrial policy is needed even for EVs to make them actually make sense economically. Most things start like that, nuclear power in the 50s and so on. It was not economical. It still isn't. It's mostly a state-backed affair. But many industries started like that. I think it will take a few more years, but eventually green tech will have a great return on investment. But the start will be very expensive, and only governments can foot the bill.
Yeah, I hope we come up with some non-toxic batteries. I haven't seen them yet, and all the funding keeps going toward the lithium. So I would be perfectly in favor of funding sodium battery research, and I mean, my point would be that ideally we would subsidize things taking into account their cost. So lithium has a cost, oil and gas maybe has a cost in terms of pollution, and potentially biotech has a cost. But I think those costs should be based in material reality and facts of the world rather than Frankenstein or some kind of I guess an idea. For example, I think Alex Jones, if I were to name the number one public figure who's kind of out against biotech, be someone who says that we've got human animal hybrids, and and it's like, what is he referencing there? What is he saying? He's saying that we use animals like pigs or something in terms of the idea of we could grow a human organ, and we're gonna, instead of cloning a human and stealing its organs, we're gonna
Oh
grow
yeah,
these organs inside of pigs, and
yeah.
that is the big scary thing. Or
I
another
mean,
thing
they
I've
tried it
actually,
in China
yeah, I mean,
like
one of the
like a
things
few years ago.
my friend, he had a gum graft, so he had receding gum line, and he got dead skin from a corpse. I mean, this is what doctors do, and they put that in his mouth, and now it's growing. So
Yeah,
it's someone else's flesh, and we've been doing that
skin.
for a
Yeah.
while with for people who need plastic surgery, for burn victims, as we'll use dead people's faces and graft them onto a
I mean,
different
even
person's face.
insulin.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah, exactly.
I have a friend of mine. He was born diabetic, type 1 diabetes. And, just a few decades ago, until back like the 90s, most of the insulin that diabetic people used was either from pigs, but sometimes people were allergic and couldn't use it, or from corpses. You know, they would grab a fresh corpse, open the pancreas and extract the insulin. Nowadays, it's much easier. We just cultivate some bacteria, and which were inserted with the human gene for insulin, and they produce it for us. So yeah, that's one example. For example, yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, there are these moral and ethical questions, and I think it's, if individuals feel uncomfortable with using biotech, I think they have the right to not. If you don't want to take the insulin for your diabetes, or if you don't want to take the COVID vaccine because of abortion, or whatever the explanation is. Um, I would optimally like individuals have the right to opt out to these certain things, or it's an opt-in
Hmm.
process. You don't have to use medical science. You don't have to go to the doctor. You don't have to go to the hospital if you don't want to do that. But for everybody else, allowing these technologies to go forward, um, I feel like maybe that's I'm stating this from a libertarian perspective, and I guess the reason why I think that's unfortunate is because I think increasingly it's difficult to make the libertarian case for anything. I think that one of the things that made America a industrial powerhouse, a technological powerhouse, is that on a religious level, actually, even though this country was ostensibly Christian, but church attendance reached its height in the 1950s. That actually, if you go back to the 1700s, less people went to church. And that was largely because, it's kind of a frontier, and you move out to the middle of nowhere and you build a farm.
Hmm.
And so there wasn't necessarily the religious structure set up. I mean, people still read the Bible, they still prayed and worshiped, but
Yeah.
institutionalized religion was not as powerful during the founding of America. And in the 1950s, we reached this new height of church attendance. And I think we started to lose something at that point. We started to lose some of our libertarian attitudes, the idea of, you have the right to experiment, you have the right to do what you want to do. And I think there's much more of a tendency since the 1950s, especially on a question like abortion, which I'm not saying everyone was having abortions prior to that. But I'm saying that I think that the quote unquote conservative attitude, if you had asked 200 years ago or 100 years ago and you tried to explain to people what is a libertarian or what is a liberal, what is a conservative, I think a lot of the concept of a conservative used to be around economic policy. Like the question was, do you want to maintain the gold standard, or do you want to, have freedom of trade, or do you want to have tariffs? Like those sorts of conversations were more important. And now we've shifted into a context where on the conservative side, people are extremely opposed to biotech. And then on the liberal side or the left-wing side, you have arguments about, I think they're less prominent, but you still have arguments about, we have to make sure it's ethical and it's safe. And that tends to, I find that language has already become dominant within AI, that everything's about AI alignment, and AI alignment is always about keeping it safe and keeping it equitable, make sure that, no offensive images are produced, no pornography is produced, it never says misinformation. And so, it's that kind of regulation which, it comes from both sides of the political spectrum, that I'm expecting that not to be the driving force for regulation, but I'm expecting companies that feel threatened by technology will manipulate those sentiments in order to get regulation passed. As we're already seeing, I think Gavin Newsom on his desk, I saw people telling me, you got to call Gavin Newsom, you got to write a letter to Gavin Newsom to regulate AI.
Yeah.
And, maybe some of it is fair. Like if an AI causes a plane to crash and all the people die, then obviously the company should be held liable. But I think to me, that's just basic logic of anything. That'd be true if I had a flamethrower or a match and I accidentally lit a building on fire. I would be held liable for the building burning down. So I don't think we don't need special additional laws to regulate what happens if an AI causes damage. That's just, we already have a legal system that provides for, suing for civil damages if there's...
Exactly.
So the idea that we need additional regulation is acting... these are from people who don't understand the legal system, and they think that, if a plane crashed, if we don't pass a specific law against AI, I guess they'll just get off scot-free. And so we need this, essentially what it amounts to is double punishment. It's a second layer of punishment for AI specifically, saying that and let's take car crashes for example. People say a Tesla car hit a child. Okay, well, how many human drivers hit children every year, and do we sue car companies because a human driver hit a child? No, we don't sue the car company. I'm not saying Tesla can't be held liable, but it has to be placed in context, right? So how many people die every year from human drivers versus Tesla autopilot, and what is the proportion? This is something that's very difficult for people to get their brains wrapped around, is per capita. What is the danger per capita, per use?
Yeah, per capita.
It's not something that it seems like this is a problem of the fact that most people are psychologically geared toward village life, where you're dealing with a small number, a Dunbar's number of people. And so if you hear about a murder or a theft or a fire, then you don't really need to calculate per capita because it's just something happening in your immediate vicinity. Whereas when we're dealing with a society with hundreds of millions of people, and then there's a big news story about Tesla crashed into somebody, or, an AI created porn of Taylor Swift or something like that. Or let's say with biotech, there was a medical procedure that occurred and it messed up and somebody died. All of those stories to that village Dunbar's number, all of those seem like, I guess 1 out of every 100 people is dying, but it's actually more like 1 out of every million people. This is a consistent problem that, there's no way to really solve that other than to work with media, like at the level of media corporations, and to try to influence them from the top down and have them not amplify what are essentially
Yeah.
amounts to disinformation effectively because it's distorting the proportion of an event.
The fact, yeah. I mean, and if you think that's a problem, I don't say like in 10 years, but in 20 or 30, biotechnology will open an even bigger can of worms. For example, when babies start being born in altered DNA, I mean, can they sue their parents? Oh no, I have red hair and I wanted blonde hair or something like that. It will bring a big legal can of worms. Uh, I think even bigger than AI in terms of liability, even in distinctions, because you will start to see people who refuse giving their children genetic therapies and so on, and people who don't. And so when you go to admissions, say to college, will you have a DEI board for genetically altered people and non-genetically altered people? How are you going to untangle that mess? I'm really interested in that aspect of the future. How will people deal with it, with both AI and the consequences of biotechnology?
Yeah, I think it's going to profoundly change our notion of identity. In the same way that when Anglo-Saxons sailed across the ocean from Britain and they landed in America, at first there was a period where they were ostensibly still Englishmen, they were still citizens of the crown, subjects of the crown. But it really didn't take very long for those people to start to rebel, and within basically 60 years. So a lot of the people, people who landed the Mayflower as children were alive by the time that there were these actual rebellions against the English crown in the 17th century. And of course, in the 18th century, they actually established an independent government. Um, you know, biotech, I see that as a similar process, as something that we're going on a journey. We're going to a new place where it's an unexplored continent. We haven't been there before. And the people who arrive in that new place, first, they're going to be small in number, a few dozen people, a few hundred people. But they're going to have a radically different perspective. It's possible that somebody who is the result, who basically owes their life to, and we're already seeing that with IVF, right? There are people who say, I was conceived with IVF, or my children were conceived with IVF, and that changes
Yes.
your perspective. When your life, it's the same relationship we have with our parents, right? So I wouldn't be alive if my parents didn't do what they did, and my grandparents, and you start to go back and you start to realize that this is where people get their sense of identity from that point of conception. It's really difficult to overcome that or ignore that. And from the outside, maybe we can dismiss it or think it's not significant. But when your own identity, you realize that distinction. I would make another analogy would be borders. So in America, there's a law that says you have to be a natural born citizen to be president. And let's say, like Arnold Schwarzenegger, you came to America as a young man, you worked hard, you got a career, you became popular, you became the governor of California, the largest state in the country.
California, yeah.
And he's not able to become president. Now, whether he would win or not, I don't know, but it's against the law. And so people like that, were on a technicality, you're not a real American. You're not a natural born American. Well, what happens when we have human beings who are not natural born human beings? That's going to change their perspective, the way that they view the rest of the world, the way they view technology, the way that they view race, the way that they view culture. All of that is
Exactly.
going to change. And we can try to predict that, but it's very difficult for us to truly, because it's one thing to run a thought experiment, but it's another thing to really have that immutable characteristic about yourself. And we're again, you can see that slightly with people who get a surgery and they're like, oh well, I got plastic surgery and part of my body is somebody else's body. But it's one thing to have that happen as an adult. It's another thing to be born under those circumstances. Like we have this term cesarean section because supposedly Julius Caesar was born this way, or I think Alexander the Great as well. And there's all these myths and prophecies about what that means. The point of origin, the way that people are conceived, that I think we're underestimating how powerful that is from a sociological perspective, and then what that will lead to, like the type of religion that will appeal to somebody who's gone through that process versus what we would consider the religious landscape as it is. I think that's going to have an impact. I don't have an exact detailed description of what that will look like.
That goes back around to the first thing we talked at the beginning of this interview. Land, Nick Land. He calls it techno singularity. Basically an event horizon. Like in black holes, past the event horizon, you can't really comprehend what's happening, at least not under current physical laws. I think the same can be said about the future, all these changes, even from a religious perspective, identity perspective, you mentioned also race. I think all these genetic advancements will eventually bring up the uncomfortable topic of HBT and so on. But that's really the small fish. HBT is just a small part. Even AI and so on, I think will bring about a fundamental rethinking of humanity as a whole. That's really what Land talks about. Even from a semi-Marxist perspective, the changes that AI will bring to the workplace, to the so-called means of production. From a materialist perspective, this will bring reordering of some parts of our society, and in the end, we'll have to wait and see how human beings will cope, either creating new religions or cults or whatever.
We're almost out of time here on our hour. I want to give you the last word. I think you are. I mean, what you just said.
This last word. Yeah.
I think it was kind of perfect, actually. So I won't really ask for anything more other than if there's something you want to plug, something you're reading, something you'd like to suggest or promote. You have the floor to do so.
I mean, if anyone who's listening in is more interested on this last part I talked about, I think you can read, the Dark Enlightenment by Nick Land. It's a scary title, but it's a relatively short book. I think 150 pages or so on. It's accessible, and I think it's interesting. I read it a few years ago, and I think I would recommend to your audience.
Okay, excellent. Well, Peter, I appreciate your time. Fascinating conversation.
Thank you.
And we will leave it there, and I hope we can speak again someday.
Yeah, goodbye.
All right, take care. Bye-bye. All right, so that was the conversation. If you guys liked it, you have to hit the like button. You have to comment. You have to restack. Recently, I got an email from Substack. I don't know if they're listening to this. I don't know if they're reading the transcript, but I got an email from Substack about I don't even want to say, but apparently Substack they have a certain way of doing things, and I guess if you want to figure out what I'm talking about, you're going to have to get my attention, and we can speak about this. But essentially, Substack has a model. There's three ways you can pay. Number one is there's a monthly subscription. where you guys have access to paywalled posts. I mean, I think you also can gain access to like a group chat and DMs, and like there's all sorts of little things that you can get. Outside of that, there's a yearly subscription, which is a bit cheaper, and you can do that way. And then there's a founding subscription where you can sort of pay a lot of money up front for some kind of theoretical benefit. But unfortunately, Substack doesn't really allow you to do tiers. It doesn't allow you to say like, well, here's the tier 1, here's the tier 2. So if you guys are interested in that, you can contact me for that. I guess I'm having to change the language. Like if you've been around for a while and you've seen the way that I advertise the subscriptions, you might see a change going forward in terms of what it says on that page, because they didn't like the language that I was using. Sorry, I didn't read. I guess I didn't read the terms and conditions. You're supposed to read the terms again. So, we've changed some of our language. But if you guys want to, receive a discount, if you've watched the full video here and you want to receive a discount, I guess this is the new way we're going with things, is because I want to offer people cheaper options. The default, it's $9 a month. But if $9 a month is too much for people, I want to offer people 50% off. And I was previously doing that in a different way, and now we're doing a new way, which is essentially if you restack or you comment and you say, obviously I'd like you to say something nice. I would prefer that you say something nice instead of just saying, give me discount, give me 50% off discount. But if you would like to say something nice, that would be preferable, to be like, hey, love this article. This is great. Would love to subscribe to this. Can I get a discount? I don't know what secret code word. Use hashtag. What secret code should we use? You guys should come up with a secret code for me. What's the hashtag strawberries? If you use hashtag strawberries, I probably should use something like that. Hashtag deep left. That's probably the best way to do it, right? If you leave a comment or you Substack or restack. Sorry, not Substack. If you restack or you comment, and in your restack or in your comment you use hashtag deep left, one word, no spaces, just hashtag deep left, then I will, if I see that, I will DM you with a 50% discount. But you might need to give me your email address, which you probably will, is fine because you have to use an email to sign up for Substack. So anyway, that's something I'm experiencing. That's just me. This is like a post-show notes. Not part of the interview, but this is where I talk to the audience. I only get like 5 minutes at the end of these interviews to do like housekeeping stuff, and that's what I'm doing now. So yeah, hashtag deep left in a restack or in a comment, and of course don't just say hashtag deep left. Write a nice comment, glaze me, be nice to me, say something nice, tell me I'm handsome. This guy's really handsome. Hashtag deep left, and then I'll DM you or I'll email you, one of those two, and we'll get you a 50% off discount because as much as I would love all of my subscribers to pay me a lot of money every month, as much as I would like you to tithe 10% of your income to my Substack, I think people. There's some people out there who, when it's a binary choice between subscribing and not subscribing, the 50% discount would go a long way. So, yeah, we're offering 50% discounts to those who ask. Obviously, if you don't ask, you're not going to get it. And the way you ask is you use that hashtag deep left in a restack or a comment. And we might change that policy over time if I don't know. As the situation changes, who knows what'll happen? Maybe this is a dumb idea. I'm sure. I started just to let you guys know, when I started this off, it was $50 a month. When I first started this off back in January or February, I said, hey, if you want to sign up, it's $50 a month, which is a lot. That's a lot of money, $50 a month. And people complained, and they said, well, you'd have a lot more subscribers if you lowered it. So we lowered it, but there's an optimal number. I don't know what the optimal number is. Is it $1 a month? Is it $50 a month? I don't know. So I'm doing the best I can. I'm trying to run a business. I'm a small business. I'm an entrepreneur. All my income comes from Substack. I don't have a part-time job. I just work. And if you guys, don't believe me, look at how much content we're producing. We're doing interviews. These are the best interviews in the world. We're doing articles. They're some of the best articles you've ever seen. So, the proof is in the pudding. I don't need to tell you how hard. I don't need to tell you I'm putting in 80 hours a week. You can just see it. You can see what I'm doing. And so I appreciate your support. Anyway, I usually don't do that much money talk. I usually don't do a lot of money talk. I try not to do a lot of money talk. It's ugly. No one wants to hear money talk. No one wants to hear about money. That's gross. This is idealism. We want to get away from the world of money. We want to get out of the corporate world and the merchant mindset, and we want to do something completely different. So I apologize for the money talk. I just got this disturbing email where they said you're not allowed to have these tiered subscriptions in this way, and they're threatening me. They're threatening me. So what can I do? I'm beholden. I'd like, $80 a month for special benefits, video chatting with people, book reviews, whatever, the whole 9 yards. I'd love to cater to a higher paying audience. I'd much prefer to work with like 10 people paying for $80 a month than a lot of people paying, 10% of that. But I don't know. We'll get in touch. We'll talk about it. We'll figure it out. So yeah, the other thing I'm concerned about, to be honest with you, is I'm concerned. Frankly, YouTube would never do that. I used to be on YouTube for a number of years, and when I was on YouTube, they would have never said, "Oh, you're linking to a different website. That violates our terms and procedures." It's like, seriously, bro? This is what happened to freedom of speech. What happened to, I'm a business owner. Like, I'm using your platform and you're making money off of me. Why so greedy? Why so greedy? Why are you so greedy? So that's my question. And I didn't know this. Nobody told me this. Nobody alerted me to this. Nobody said, hey, man, just so you know, you can't link to any other websites where you make money because Substack will punish you for that. Because they, it only need, if you're, it's a monopoly. And Twitter does the same thing. They ban the Substack links. They deboost Substack links. So if I repost my Substack on Twitter, I get deboosted. So all these companies are sick. They're sick, twisted, evil. That's why I'm trying to, honestly, that's why I try to have multiple websites going on, so you're not beholden to this, because I'm afraid that, to me, this is a free speech issue. It's like, I'm using your platform. You're making money off of me. It's not like you're making $0 off of me. You're making money off of my content. You're doing nothing. You're providing me with web hosting, and then Stripe is the payment processor. So they're not even doing the payment processing themselves in-house. It's all outsourced. So Substack doesn't do anything. It's just a marketing campaign, essentially. That's all it is. So you're not doing any work. You're not providing any value. You're just a middleman. And then you're telling me I can't have multiple websites. I can't advertise my other multiple websites on Substack. I mean, that's going too far, folks. But that's the way it is. I'm a slave to the system, the Substack system. So they've got me in a vice grip, and there's nothing I can do. So I have to play by the rules. But yeah, I used to use multiple websites, and I guess we can't do that anymore. So we're stuck. They're not going to like it. If they listen to this, if their AI looks at the transcript or whatever, they're not going to like what they see. And it's crazy because I don't even make that much money. I make like $10 a day. $10 a day. You know, I should be eligible for food stamps, and they're coming after me. Really? You know, shouldn't you be harassing somebody else? So, I don't know. We'll see. We'll see what happens, guys. Oh, getting that email just ruined my day. So I had to dump that. I had to do a dump. I had to dump. Now I'm getting a comment. Really not really. He says, do you believe the Jewish people are entitled to their homeland in Israel? I'll say, nope. And he's probably going to attack me. He's a ruralite. This is from the Lane Archive. He says, every entitled white rural farm kid is trained to be a mass shooter. Okay. What website is that from? Decadent Liberals. This is from Walter Rhine. Interesting. Okay. Yeah, this is all ridiculous stuff. Christianity. I don't know. I'm just blabbing on. We've really gotta end this. This is becoming a ramble. No one wants to hear my ramble. Nobody wants to hear me talk. You know, this is more, dude. I'm gonna get myself in trouble. The longer I talk, I'm gonna get myself in trouble. Everyone's gonna get mad. It's like, have you now or have you ever been a Zionist? Have you ever worked for AIPAC? Oh, dude. Good night. All right. Yeah, we got to end it there. Sorry I've dragged this on. But when I'm frustrated, that's what I do. I rant. Have you guys noticed that? When I do these interviews, instead of asking the other person what they believe, I start going on a lecture. I start ranting. It's a bad habit. It's a disgusting habit. Okay, we have to stop. I have to stop. Sorry, guys. I'm multitasking. I was supposed to hit end of recording a while ago, and I didn't. Okay, thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. See you next time. Bye-bye.